Imagine a child abandoned in the wilderness, growing up without human contact, running with wolves, howling at the moon, or swinging through the trees like a monkey.
It sounds like something out of folklore, but history is filled with real life cases of feral children, humans raised in the wild, away from civilization.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Curious Past, the podcast where we uncover the forgotten, unexpected, and downright fascinating corners of history. I'm Shan.
And I'm Danny. Today we're exploring some of the most astonishing cases of children who lived like animals and what happened when they were brought back into society.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's dive into our first story.
Our first story begins in the late 18th century in the forests of southern France near the region of Aveyron. Villagers had long reported sightings of a strange feral child, naked, scavenging for food, and avoiding human contact. Attempts to capture him were unsuccessful, as he was remarkably swift and skilled at surviving in the wild.
Then, in 1797, the boy was first caught by local hunters. He was around 10 years old at the time and managed to escape back into the wilderness. 2 years later, in 1799, he was captured again, this time for good. He was taken in by villagers who were both fascinated and frightened by him. He had no spoken language, seemed indifferent to cold, and displayed behaviors unlike anything they had seen before.
News of the wild boy spread quickly, reaching the intellectual elite in Paris. At a time when Europe was grappling with questions about human nature, society, and the effects of civilization, the boy's discovery was seen as a unique opportunity to study someone untouched by modern society, a natural man.
The boy, named Victor, was brought to the National Institute for the Deaf in Paris, where he became the subject of study for a young physician, Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard. Itard believed that Victor had been abandoned at a young age and had somehow survived alone in the wild. He saw Victor as a chance to test Enlightenment theories about education, nurture, and human potential.
Itard took on the task of civilizing Victor, attempting to teach him language, social norms, and even emotion. While Victor showed some progress, learning to associate words with objects and developing a close relationship with Itard's assistant, Madame Guérin, he never fully acquired speech. Over time, Itard became disheartened, concluding that Victor's time in isolation had irreversibly affected his ability to develop language and reasoning.
Victor's case ignited debates among philosophers and scientists. Some saw him as proof that humans were inherently social beings who needed society to develop intellect and communication. Others believed his condition proved the existence of a critical period for language acquisition, suggesting that if a child does not learn language by a certain age, they never will.
Victor also sparked discussions about disability and education. While some saw him as a failure of civilization, others viewed him as a vulnerable individual needing care and understanding. His story eventually faded from public attention, and he lived out his days under the care of Madame Guérin, passing away in his 40s.
Today, Victor's story continues to fascinate researchers. Some modern scholars believe he may have been autistic, explaining his lack of social interaction and speech development. Others suggest he might have had a developmental disorder or even childhood trauma that led to his abandonment and later behaviors.
His case remains one of the earliest and most well documented studies of language deprivation, contributing to what we now understand about linguistics, psychology, and child development.
Victor of Aveyron's life raises profound questions about human nature, the limits of education, and what it truly means to be civilized. Was he a wild child, or was he simply different from what society expected?
What do you think? Could Victor have ever been fully integrated into society, or was his fate sealed by the circumstances of his childhood? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Now, on to the next story.
Our next story takes us to 1920s India in a remote village near Midnapore, now in West Bengal. A local missionary, Reverend Joseph Amrito Lal Singh, reported a shocking discovery. According to Singh, he and a group of villagers raided a wolf's den deep in the forest and found two young girls living among the wolves. They were named Kamala and Amala. Singh described them as having wolf like behaviors. They walked on all fours, avoided human contact, had sharp teeth, and howled at night.
He took the girls back to his orphanage where he attempted to rehabilitate them. Tragically, Amala, the younger of the two, passed away within a year, while Kamala survived until 1929. Over time, Kamala reportedly began to show signs of human behavior, learning a few words and walking upright.
At the time, Singh's claims were widely accepted, especially in an era when stories of wild children fascinated the public. However, as years passed, skepticism grew. Many researchers and historians began questioning the validity of Singh's account.
Critics pointed out inconsistencies in Singh's reports and a lack of corroborating evidence. Some suggested that Kamala and Amala were not actually raised by wolves, but were simply abandoned orphans with developmental disabilities. It's possible that Singh, whether intentionally or not, exaggerated their behaviors to gain funding for his orphanage and to spread his religious message.
Additionally, no detailed medical examinations were ever conducted to determine if the girls had truly adapted to a wolf like existence. The photographs and records available do not provide conclusive proof of their so called feral state.
The story of the Wolf Girls of India sparked heated debates about nature versus nurture. If Kamala and Amala had truly been raised by wolves, it would support the idea that humans can adapt entirely to an animalistic lifestyle if deprived of socialization from birth.
However, modern psychology suggests an alternative explanation. The girls may have had severe cognitive or physical disabilities, which could have led them to be abandoned by their families. Singh's observations may have been misinterpretations of behaviors caused by malnutrition, trauma, or neurological conditions rather than evidence of a wolf upbringing.
Decades later, research by French surgeon Serge Arolez exposed major inconsistencies in Singh's account. His book Le Nigné des Enfants Loups in 2007 details how Singh fabricated much of the story. The so-called original diary of the Wolf Girls was actually written years after Kamala's death, and stage photographs were taken long after both girls had passed.
Further evidence suggests that Kamala likely had Rett syndrome, a neurodevelopmental disorder, rather than exhibiting wolf like behavior. Witnesses also claim that Singh manipulated Kamala into acting like a feral child in front of visitors to gain financial support. His collaboration with American professor Robert M. Zing led to a book that was widely criticized, ultimately costing Zing his academic career.
Scholars now widely agree that Kamala and Amala were victims of an embellished narrative rather than a true case of feral children. But what is clear is that the Kamala and Amala story has influenced literature, psychology, and even folklore about feral children for decades.
Singh's motives, whether financial, religious, or misguided, remain uncertain, but the story serves as a cautionary tale about sensationalized myths and the ethics of exploiting vulnerable individuals.
So whether the story of Kamala and Amala was real or a hoax, the truth may never be fully known. However, their story continues to captivate and challenge our understanding of human development and survival.
What do you think? Were Kamala and Amala truly raised by wolves, or were they victims of a well crafted myth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Let's move on to the next story.
John Ssebunya was born in the 1980s in Kabonga, Uganda, during the country's civil war. His father, allegedly involved in the conflict, killed his mother when John was around 3 years old. Fearing for his life, John fled into the jungle, where he was taken in by a troop of African green monkeys.
For about 3 years, John lived among the monkeys, mimicking their behavior, learning to climb trees, and eating a diet of fruits, nuts, and roots. He communicated with them and was fully integrated into their group.
In 1991, a young girl spotted John foraging with monkeys and informed her village. When locals attempted to rescue him, the monkeys threw rocks and sticks to protect him. He was eventually captured and taken back to human society. His behavior was reportedly unusual. He was afraid of humans, communicated with grunts, and seemed more comfortable among the monkeys than people.
Malnourished and covered in sores, he struggled to adapt. initially unable to digest cooked food. Medical examinations confirmed he had lived in the wild and he had also lost a toe.
John was taken in by Paul and Molly Waswa, who ran a Christian orphanage in Masaka. There, caretakers worked to reintegrate him into society. At first, he struggled with basic human behaviors. He had difficulty standing upright, using utensils, and speaking. But over time, with care and patience, John learned to walk, talk, and interact with people.
He eventually learned English and attended school. He also discovered a remarkable singing voice, joining the Pearl of Africa Children's Choir and later performing in the UK. In 1999, he toured churches in England, gaining international attention.
Alongside music, John developed a passion for running and football. In 2003, he captained Uganda's Special Olympics football team in Dublin, winning 2 medals. He continued singing, competing, and eventually saved enough money to buy a small house in Bombo, Uganda, where he currently resides.
John's story has fascinated researchers, but some experts question whether he was truly raised by monkeys in the way folklore suggests. Unlike other cases of alleged feral children, John was not entirely nonverbal and adapted relatively quickly to human life, which suggests he may not have spent as many years in the wild as initially thought.
Psychologists believe that while John may have lived among animals, his survival likely depended more on his own instincts rather than direct parenting by the monkeys. Some researchers also suggest that his behaviors may have been a result of childhood trauma rather than true feral development.
John's story quickly gained international attention, sparking debates about the limits of human adaptation and survival. His case became a symbol of resilience, demonstrating how a child could survive in extreme conditions and later thrive despite adversity.
Some have compared his case to other feral children legends, questioning how much of the story was myth versus reality. While his tale may not have been as dramatic as some versions suggest, it remains one of the most well documented cases of a child surviving in the wild.
So, was John Ssebunya truly raised by monkeys, or was his story shaped by sensationalism? While we may never fully know the extent of his time in the jungle, his journey from the wild to the stage is nothing short of incredible.
What do you think? Did John really live among monkeys, or is his case another example of myth overtaking reality? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Now, let's move on to our final story.
One of the most shocking modern cases took place in Ukraine. Oxana Malaya was born in 1983, and her parents were alcoholics who neglected her from infancy.
At just 3 years old, Oksana was left outside and sought warmth in the family's dog kennel. The dogs accepted her, and she lived among them for approximately 5 years.
During her time with the dogs, Oxana learned to walk on all fours, bark, growl, and even bare her teeth when threatened. She ate raw meat and scraps, slept curled up for warmth, and had little to no human interaction.
In 1991, social workers discovered Oksana living with the dogs. When they attempted to take her, the dogs became aggressive, trying to protect her. Upon her rescue, she could barely speak and communicated mostly through barking and growling.
Oksana was placed in a foster home and underwent years of rehabilitation to relearn human behavior. Initially, she struggled with speech and social skills, but with intensive therapy, she gradually improved.
Though Oksana never fully overcame the effects of her early isolation, she regained the ability to speak and interact with others. She eventually found work at a farm where she cares for animals, perhaps the beings she understands the best.
Despite her traumatic past, she has been able to build a relatively stable life, though she remains under supervision due to her cognitive and emotional challenges.
Oksana Malaya's story is one of extreme neglect, resilience, and rehabilitation. Her early years among dogs profoundly shaped her behavior, making reintegration into human society a long and difficult process.
Her case remains one of the most well documented examples of a feral child, highlighting both the incredible adaptability of humans and the deep impact of early childhood experiences.
These stories leave us with more questions than answers. Are feral children proof that nature can override nurture? Can a human completely lose their ability to communicate? And most importantly, how many more undiscovered cases exist in the wild today?
If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's lost children, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which case shocked you the most. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay curious.